this video, I'll show you how to make a lidded box out of slabs. So I've already rolled out my slabs for my box using my templates that I made in a previous video. So for today, I'm going to need my base and lid template. I'm also going to need my wall template. So for the base and lid, you're going to make one base, one lid. For the walls, you're going to make 4 walls. And then the flange is going to be the piece that is going to help our lid to stay attached to the wall so that it doesn't slide around. And then our foot piece. So I've already rolled out my slabs for all of these templates. Something you want to make sure of, especially if you're absent on the day that we roll out our slabs, the slabs for your base and for your lid are going to be thicker than all of your other templates, okay? So for your lid, you've been working on a separate design on that. So those have already been rolled out, but when you get to your base, you'll want it to be the same thickness as your lid, okay? So those are gonna be a little bit thicker. The rest of our slabs will be a little bit thinner. So my slabs have been sitting on a board. I rough cut them. They've been wrapped in dry paper towel and stored in a plastic bag for a couple of days to stiffen up. So as I'm taking my slabs out, I'm going to work on them one at a time. So I'm going to start with my base slash lid. I'm going to get rid of the paper towel that's wrapped around these. The paper towel's now damp. That tells me that it's absorbed some of the water out of my slabs. And we want our slabs to be a little bit past soft leather hard as we're constructing these. Now, as we build our boxes, it will be helpful to work on a banding wheel. So there's a variety of banding wheels available in the classroom. They all do basically the same thing. I've put a piece of scrap paper down on top of mine. You could also use a piece of paper towel or your mat that you have in class. But this is just going to prevent my clay from sticking to the banding wheel, okay, as I'm compressing. So before I cut this to template, I want to make sure I'm compressing my slab. And to do that, again, I'm going to use my rubber kidney. And I'm going to compress and go in lots of different directions to smooth out the clay, realign the clay particles, and essentially make this slab stronger. And I'm going to make sure that I take care to go in multiple directions, all the way to the edge and on both sides of my slab. So I'm applying a little bit of pressure so that I'm getting rid of the texture from the slab roller, but not so much pressure that I'm scraping a lot of the clay away. Carefully flip it over and compress. All right, so the next thing is to cut your base or your lid. And depending on the project, you maybe already have cut your lid, and all you would need to cut today would be your base. But assuming that you still have to cut your base and your lid, you're going to put the template on top, and I would make sure that your slab isn't sticking to the banding wheel before you do this. I'm going to place my template on top. And for this, especially for the lid and base, the edges here are curved, but then we have straight edges going this way. So I'm going to use a combination of my fettling knife and my pin tool to cut this. And then also, if it helps you, you can also grab a ruler or a straight edge or something in the classroom or that you might have on you to help you cut a straight line. You can cut just right up against the template also. Make sure your cutting tool is straight up and down when you do this. Always cut on your dominant side. So this is why the banding wheel is going to help you. Make sure you're not cutting at an angle, straight up and down towards you. One other thing you want to be careful, especially when you get to the ends, to hold down the template so it doesn't move on you, and then slice that whole piece off before you try to round the corner. I'm just going to remove this piece of clay out of the way for right now. I'm going to do my corners last. So I'm going to go back in with my fettling knife and cut my other 3 sides. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my pin tool because it's easier to cut a curve with a pin tool. It's got a little bit more of a thin point to it. So I'm just going to go in and round off my edges here. Again, I'm keeping my pin tool straight up and down so that I'm not like gouging the inside here. I want it to be right up perpendicular to the edge of my template. I'm going to do this on all 4 sides. Okay, so now I have my lid or my base cut to the template. The next thing I want to do is I want to finish my edges because right now where I've cut, as this dries out, those edges are going to be very sharp. So we want to make sure that we're rounding our edges. They shouldn't really be squared off at all. We want them to be as round as possible. And you want to do this while the clay is still soft enough to be manipulated a little bit. So before I move on to any of my other slabs, I'm going to finish this one. As I'm blending or rounding my edges here, I'm pushing down along this edge. So let me see if I'm able to pull this up for you to see a little bit better. So this edge right here where I've created this cut, this corner is the edge that I'm blending down. So I'm pushing down on this corner, okay? And then I'm going to flip it. I'm going to do the other side, okay? So I'm just going to start here, and I'm going to do a little bit at a time. I'm not trying to press this all the way down my first time. I'm going to go back and forth until I'm creating a curve, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, a couple things about making your curve. First of all, it's important to make sure that your hands aren't real dry when you're doing this. You don't want to soak your slab with water, but you can get your hands a little bit damp. That might help you. Okay, and a nice, even, gentle pressure is going to be important. And then don't forget about the corners of the box also. So I'm just going to kind of carefully push down my corners, and then I'm going to hold this up for you to see. All right, so if I hold this up, you should be able to see that that corner is no longer sharp like it is over here on the side. I do have some issues here that I'm going to blend in a little bit, but first I'm going to go through and I'm going to finish doing this rounding or finishing of my edges on all 4 sides of my slab. Okay, so the top part looks pretty done. I might go back in and touch it up, but I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing to the back side. The piece of paper is getting a little damp. I think I'm going to swap it out for another one. All right, so I'm doing the same thing here. I'm pressing down along my edge. Okay, so I'm almost done with this slab. The last thing I want to do, I want to take care of my edges. These are especially important because these are going to be really noticeable once our box is completed. So I'm going to just take some time to blend this edge right here where you can see almost like a seam that was created. So I'm just gently blending that seam and just helping this to be as rounded as I can. Again, and if your hands are getting dry at this point, make sure that you add a little bit of water. Again, not a lot, but just a little bit to your hands to help prevent that. So I'm going to do this on all 4 sides. Okay, so at this point my slab looks pretty finished. I can always smooth out a few little areas later if I notice once it gets a little bit more stiff. So at this point I would then move on to my other slab that is a base or lid. While I'm working on my next slab, I want to make sure that this one is not drying out. So depending on how far we get in class, your teacher may tell you to wrap it a certain way. But for now, it's just really important that it stays in a bag. And with that being said, also, your other slabs that you might not be working with at the moment should always be wrapped in plastic bags so that they're not drying out while you're sitting here working. So I'm gonna put mine in a plastic bag, and then I'm gonna come back and we're gonna talk about the walls next. So I would normally put this one away and work on my base slash lid. I'm not going to have you watch me do two of these, so I'm going to skip to the walls, and I will do that in just a moment. Okay, so I just put my lid base slab in a plastic bag, and now I'm going to focus on the four walls that I have rough cut. So I'm going to handle these very similar to the way I handled my lid and base slabs, but when it comes to rounding our edges, it's going to be a little bit different. So again, the first thing that I want to do is compress my slab, both sides, just like we did before. Make sure at this point, since you've been using your rubber kidney, make sure that there's no dried clay along your edge. If there is, just get it wet, maybe with a damp paper towel or a little bit of water out of your bucket. Just clean that edge off, and then make sure you're compressing again both sides of all of your slabs. Okay, so my slab is compressed pretty well. I also want to make a note that this slab is quite a bit thinner than the slab that we rolled out for our base and lid. Okay, so we got to make sure we don't get those mixed up. All right, so after my slab has been compressed, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out my wall. So for this, because I have all straight edges, I'm going to use my fettling knife, and I'm going to always be cutting towards me on my dominant side. One thing I forgot to mention, if you're working at home and you don't have a banding wheel, you could just work on a piece of paper that you could then turn to help you so that you're not always constantly touching your clay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my wall. Okay, so I have my wall cut out. I'm just going to take my template off. At this point, I want to make sure that I'm not stuck to my paper. Make sure, or my paper towel, whatever I'm working underneath, make sure I didn't cut through it, which can be easy to do with the fettling knife. Okay, so maybe I'll just adjust this a little bit more. Okay. Now, for the lid and base, we rounded all of our edges at this point. For the walls, because of the way that they're going to be attached together, we're not finishing all of the edges. We're only going to finish what's going to be the top edge. The sides and the bottom are going to be joined together. So the sides, like all four walls, are going to join together along these side edges. And that's going to be a lot easier to do with a nice straight cut. I'm also going to teach you here in a minute how to do a bevel cut. And I'm going to show you two different ways depending on if you're working in class or if you're working at home. Okay, and then the bottom down here is going to attach to the base. So the only edge that's going to be visible when this box is constructed is going to be the top edge of your wall. So that's going to be one of the long sides, not the short side. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish the top, what's going to be the top edge of my box. Okay, now I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the back side. And then where that join kind of blended together. One thing I'm noticing about my clay, it's still pretty soft, so it's making this step a little bit more difficult. If you're running into issues where you're having a hard time blending, or if your clay is still really soft, you can stop and wrap it in some dry paper towel for a little while, but I wouldn't leave it sit more than 5 minutes without checking it because we don't want these to get too dry. We just want it to be about at leather hard stage, and this is, my clay is still at a soft leather hard, so I'm just going to be extra gentle as I'm blending mine. And actually I can go back a little bit later and blend this rim a little bit better. So I think I'm going to stop here and call that finished for right now. And then I'm going to get my miter tool and I'm going to show you how to do a miter cut. Okay, if you're working in class, you're going to have access to some miter tools. So this is going to, these tools are going to help you to cut a certain angle. And for boxes, we're going to want a 45-degree angle. When we match up two 45-degree angles, that's going to give us a 90-degree angle, which is going to give us a nice squared box. Okay, so there are two different types of these tools available in class. They do the same thing. You're also going to notice that you can get other degrees, like other angles, but for this project we're just going to stick with the 45-degree angles. Okay, and the way to use these tools, so for this project we're going to be creating our miter cut on our side edges, because this is where we're creating a corner. So I'm going to make sure that my tool, that I have the 45-degree angle wire, okay, and that it is flat down onto whatever surface you're cutting on. Now, my banding wheel that I'm working on here has some like ridges in it, and I can tell already that if I try to cut to use this tool on the banding wheel, it's going to cause me some problems. So I'm actually going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to work just on either my mat or my piece of paper here. Okay. And then I'm also going to pause for a minute because as I'm trying to show you this angle, my camera angle is not great. So I'm going to see if I can readjust this a bit, and then I'll show you a better camera angle in a minute. Okay, so I think this is going to be easier for you to see from this camera angle. So again, I'm going to have my tool sitting perfectly flat on the table with my mat or piece of paper underneath it. The wire kind of comes out from the middle. So if I turn this way, you can see. So I'm just going to readjust the wire, make sure that it's nice and tight on there. Okay, and then I'm going to have the side edge of my slab run flush right up next to the block of wood. So I have the wire right now sitting on the top edge of my slab, and I have the wooden part lined up here, and I'm just going to slide this down, and then I'm going to catch with my thumb down at the bottom end so that I don't distort my slab. So I'm going to do this really carefully. Again, I am cutting towards myself, and I'm watching where the wood is sliding along the edge of my slab. So my eye is looking here. I'm not really looking at that wire at all, okay? So just want to make sure that the edges are lined up together. And then this is where I'm going to catch this with my thumb and pull away. And as you can see, that gave me a 45-degree angle. Let me hold this. Let me see if I can hold this up if you can see it. Okay, so that's our mitered cut that we're looking for. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm not flipping it at all. I'm just going to rotate it around so that I can do this using my right hand. I'm going to clean my tool off a little bit. I have some clay on there that I want to clean off. So I'm going to clean that off and then do the same thing. Make sure you're holding the clay as you do this also so that it doesn't move on you. Okay, so one wall down. I'm going to go ahead and prepare another wall. So I'm going to, off camera, compress my slab, cut it to template, and then I'm going to show you how to do a mitered cut if you don't have access to one of our tools in class or if you're working at home. Okay, so I have a new wall slab that I prepared the same way as the other one. I've finished the top edge, left the sides and bottoms just cut to the template. So the next step is to bevel my edges. So this is going to be shown if you do not have a bevel tool. You're going to use your cutting tool. You'll need your cutting tool, which I have my fettling knife and a ruler or a flat, some sort of a straight edge that you can cut alongside. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this just like on the bottom of my slab so that I can look at something that's squared, because the top part of this slab has been rounded. Let me just show you. This side's been rounded. I'm going to use this side that has not been rounded. Okay, and I'm just going to look at this bottom corner of my slab. So I'm looking right here. So when I cut this to the template, I kept my cutting tool straight up and down so that I have like a straight, like this is a 90-degree angle that I've created. So a 45-degree angle is going to be half of that. So I'm just going to take my fettling knife, and if this side is vertical, this side's horizontal. I'm going to kind of come up with an angle that divides that in half, and I'm just going to press into the clay. So I'm trying to create a 45-degree angle along the edge here. Okay, and then I want to see where this meets up at the top. Okay, so where my line hits the top of the slab, I'm going to use my ruler or my straight edge to create a straight line. So let me lay my slab back down so we can see it. Okay, so my cut on my side here comes to about right there. Okay, so I'm just going to make a little mark with my tool. And then using my ruler, I'm going to line it up so that the ruler is running parallel with the edge of my slab, but it's also in line with where my fettling knife hits, like where my 45-degree angle hits the top of my slab. Okay, so like this. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my cut. When I do this cut, I want to make sure that my fettling knife is running along the edge of my ruler. So it's really important that you're holding it down as you're cutting. We also want to make sure that our fettling knife is at the right angle. So I'm going to go back and look down here, and I'm going to find that angle again, okay? And I'm going to try to keep my knife at that angle. And it really should line up with the corner up at the top. Okay, so let me just double check. And then as I cut, my knife is going to glide along the edge. I want to make sure I'm keeping my cutting tool at that same angle going towards me. And then when I get to the end here, I'm going to carefully try to catch that with my thumb so it doesn't mess up my slab. And then I will hold it up so you can see the mitered cut. Okay, so you can see that gave me a 45-degree mitered cut. All right, I'm going to just flip my slab around. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on my other side. So again, I'm going to find my 45-degree angle, and then I will do my cut. So let me find my angle first. Okay, so that's where my angle is. Okay, next thing, just going to make a little mark so I know where to line up my ruler. Make sure my ruler is parallel with the edge of my slab here. Let's see if I can get that in there better. And then again, making sure that my fettling knife is at that 45-degree angle, and then letting my knife glide along the edge of the ruler. Keeping that angle the same, and then catching it down here. Okay. Now, I have two more wall pieces. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to compress those wall pieces, cut them to template, and miter cut them. Another thing that I'm noticing about my slabs right now as I'm working, they're still pretty soft. They're still almost soft leather hard. So they're not wanting to hold their shape very well. The walls are going to be much easier to construct once the clay is a little bit more stiff. So I'm going to work on these, but while I work on my other walls, I'm going to wrap these in some dry paper towel to help them stiffen up a little bit. It's important that we're monitoring the clay temperature as we're working with these also. If your clay was getting too dry, at this point you would wrap it with damp paper towel, but since mine is pretty soft, I'm going to wrap it with dry paper towel. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of that, and then I'm going to come back in part 2, and I'm going to demonstrate how to construct the walls of your box and how to place that then on your base.